everyone. In this episode, I am trying my first bread recipe from the book. I was going to make bread this week anyway, so I thought I would just make this one instead of my usual loaf. So this is a rolled oats bread, and it starts off, of course, with rolled oats. A whole cup. And to that, it instructs to pour over 2 cups of boiling water. And then I'm going to cover it and leave it alone for an hour. And I did spoon on top a little bit of my sourdough starter just because I put that in every bread I make. But of course, that is not part of the recipe. I just hate to waste it. And then I'll add the remaining ingredients. It calls for 1/2 cup of molasses, and I'm going to spray my measuring cup with some canola oil so that the molasses doesn't stick. And it calls for cake yeast in this book. And this one in particular, let's see, it says 1/2 of a yeast cake. That's just over 2 teaspoons of dry yeast. And a little bit of salt. And it calls for 4.5 cups of flour. I'm going to start with 4. I always use a little bit less because I live in a humid climate. And just see how it looks. Looking at the recipe, it's very sparsely written, the most sparse of any one I've seen so far. It does indicate it's a wet dough. And you will benefit from me making this first so you can see what it's like. I'll go through this with you. So it's taking some effort to work just the 4 cups in. And I feel like I need to add some water to get it to move around a little bit better. I really should do this in the mixer, but I don't think they had those mixers in 1896, so I'm trying to do this like I am in 1896 for the most part. And I could use a bigger bowl, but I like to use glass bowls for videos so you can see what's going on inside, and this is the biggest one that I have. Just keep working it. You see that butter is soft, it's going to be worked in just fine. So I put in about, I would say that's just over 1/4 cup of water to make it a little bit more pliable. And I don't know if that was a mistake or not. starts to come together better. And at this point, I'm going to turn it out onto the pastry cloth, which I do with most of my baked goods if you've seen any of the other videos. I like to do the kneading and shaping on a towel. There's no instruction about kneading this bread in the recipe, but I know bread needs to have at least a little bit of kneading, and there's no gluten in oats, so I want to make sure to give it some kneading to help develop some more structure from the flour. Alright, with this possibly wet dough, I put down a hefty coat of flour. And I can always add more in as I'm working it. It's such an unusual dough. At this point, I'm realizing it's very sticky and questioning the water that I added. However, there's still another half cup of flour that needs to be, or can be, worked in, since I did not use all of it initially. And as I'm working it with the towel, I start notice it sticking to the towel, which normally not much sticks to this type of towel. It's very soft, but it does start coming together, and it takes a while to get it to be smooth. So in the recipe, and of course it's written in the description box, I always write the recipe down there. It says, by using 1/2 cup less flour, the dough is better suited for biscuits, but being soft is difficult to handle. And she's not kidding. Thank goodness for the pastry towel. I don't mind my hands getting dirty, but this, when a quarter of the dough is stuck to your fingers and you can't get it out, even after kneading it to a smooth texture. If you're familiar with bread making, you know that that's what happens. You knead it until it's nice and smooth. This one never really gets all that smooth. Also, any kind of oatmeal bread is usually very soft and tender anyway, and it's delicious. It's just not quite as fun to make as it is to eat. So I just keep working it until I get it to, I would say, a firmer consistency. Now, wet doughs like this do rise nicely. They don't have to work as hard to work up through those gluten strands. So once I got it to where I thought it was good, I oil up another bowl and throw it in there and put a plastic wrap cover over it and let it rise. It doesn't say anything about how long to rise, it just says let it rise. So typically 1 hour is good for a first rise on any bread. There it is, a less sticky mass. And look at that, it rises beautifully. I love that Red Star yeast. I have good luck with Fleischmann's too, but this particular container of Red Star has been great. So I'm being a little bit gentle with it to pull out some of the air because I don't know how sticky it's going to be. And it's not too bad now. All the flour's hydrated. And I'll just work out some of the air. And in the recipe it says beat thoroughly, so that's what I'm doing. And since it's sticky, I made a judgment call that I was going to line my pans with parchment paper. Now initially I put it in 2 pans and I weighed the dough to make sure they were relatively equal amounts in each. But after further thinking and getting it in the pan, I realized the 4 or so cups of flour is how much I use for a single loaf. So I ended up moving all of the dough into one larger loaf pan. So if you make this, you can learn from my trial and error here. Alright, now I'm playing musical pans. And I'm not really going to bother shaping it too much. I find that it often smooths out when it rises, just naturally. I'm also questioning myself for not greasing the sides where the paper doesn't touch, those shorter ends. But it worked out just fine. I find glass doesn't, things don't stick to it a whole lot anyway. And I'm going to let it rise again for about an hour until it crowns over the top considerably. And it has, and it will rise more when it's baking as well. There's no baking temperature listed, but I always bake at 350. This type of loaf, sourdough, was a little bit different. And I baked it until the internal thermometer read 185. So anywhere between 180 and 190 is good for this type of bread. You want it a little bit hotter for the crusty breads, but for this one, 185 was great. And it comes right out. I'm going to let it cool just a little bit before I cut it. I've pulled it quite long enough at this point, but I'm going to see what the structure looks like inside. It's still warm. Very nice. Fine, tender crumb. Oh, no, it's not cool enough yet. But look at that. And it tastes very velvety, almost like a cake, but it's got a crusty outside, and despite being able to taste the molasses, the bread is not sweet. I've never had anything like it, but I would make this again. But with the caveat, I will use the KitchenAid stand mixer next time.